I want to welcome everyone here tonight to the Theosophical Society in Detroit. My name is David Zimmerman. I'm a longtime Theosophist. I actually consider myself to be a neo-Theosophist. It's a little different from perhaps a traditional Theosophist. I like to bring new teachings and new ideas into the world. It's part of my soul's purpose as indicated in my horoscope, and so that's what I do. I'm retired from General Motors Design Center, where I worked for many years. I have always been a student of Theosophy and of the Ageless Wisdom Teachings. A big fan of Alice Bailey and, of course, Blavatsky and Leadbeater and other teachers, too, who have powerfully influenced me in my life. We are wondering, many of us, about the current world conditions and what is happening in the world. There's so much chaos. There doesn't seem to be adequate explanations for it. And of course, when we find ourselves in predicaments like that, it's advantageous to call upon the esoteric for knowledge and advice. I always say that knowledge of the esoteric and having an esoteric grasp of reality and life in the world as it exists is a tremendous benefit, and it's a very healing thing to have by virtue of the fact that you're able to look at things in a different perspective. Life takes on a greater meaning. The Tibetan master D.K. once said that our ability to handle crisis is the hallmark of the disciple. And certainly in my own life, I've had a number of very disastrous events, and I was able to make it through it really by being esoteric and having an esoteric outlook and a perspective on life that includes things like reincarnation, believing in a spiritual hierarchy, believing in wisdom teachings. And it has always sustained me. Tonight we're going to look at a series of vignettes presented in a PowerPoint way so that we can maybe better understand the current events. It's important to remember that we are at the end of the Piscean age of a bimillennium, and we are entering now into the age of Aquarius. We're birthing a new age, and the birthing process is a very difficult process. It's filled with a lot of pain and anguish, but once the actual birthing process is completed, it's a tremendous relief. And we're in this birthing stage. One of the things that's happening in the world, and it involves the teaching of the rays, which many of you are familiar with, is that we're living in a septenary solar system where there are 7 qualities or 7 energies called the rays, the 7 rays. They form the basis of esoteric psychology, which is a new psychology, relatively new psychology, and it will be when psychology becomes an exact science, it will be the science of the 7 rays. But these rays manifest themselves multifariously in all things. And we'll take a look at that in just a minute. But the whole idea of these 7 ray energies are extrasystemic. That means they're from beyond our solar system. They work themselves through galaxies, through our solar system, through the Pleiades, the Great Bear, into man and into his soul, his personality, his physical body is a certain ray type. We do ray analysis in this way. Once we understand the rays, we are able to give an accurate diagnosis or summation of the rays and the ray qualities that make up any particular human being. The physical ray, the ray of the physical body, the mental ray, the soul ray, the personality ray. It's all there. I've discussed these things before, and we will in future lectures give even greater detail. So what's happening is the rays are changing in the world. And the sixth ray that was so predominant during the time of the Piscean age is dying out. It was said, it's always been said, that Jesus was a sixth ray master. He brought in the ray of devotion and idealism. That we now, after 2,000 years of this particular ray influence, we find that the young people in our cultures and societies, they no longer want to believe and to give devotion. They want to know. They want answers. And that's what I'm attempting to do here tonight. I'm attempting to give some answers. So the thing that's happening very directly is that third ray energy, which is the energy of active intelligence, the fourth ray energy, fourth ray is the ray of art and harmony through conflict, and seventh ray energy, which is the ray of ceremonial order and magic, are coming in very powerfully into the world. They're going to reshape the world as we've known it and will give greater order. There'll be a Renaissance period. It's been already identified as 2025. And people, many esoteric people, students of Alice Bailey and Leadbeater and Blavatsky too, are in anticipation of this great event taking place. I see it already. I see this fourth ray, which is the ray of harmony through conflict, is very obvious to me when I look out into the world, whether I watch the news, talk to people about what's going on in the world. It is evident that the fourth ray is very powerfully being felt. I can remember back as a young kid in college when it was almost like you were feeling a tremendous birth, the last dying breath almost of sixth ray energy. And there were a lot of young people in the hippie movement who were very idealistic. And it was a real thing that I could feel, and I knew people around me who were esoteric who could feel it also. Many people are starting to feel this fourth ray energy very powerfully in the world. And it will bring what the esotericists have called a new world renaissance. 500 years ago was the Renaissance of Europe. And that Renaissance brought great art into the world. The great artists of like Leonardo, Michelangelo, you name it. There was the crafts, the guild systems were established, and people were trained. And there's a move happening toward that again of having trade schools. It's emanating. One of the things that will come about too will be decentralized government. And already we can see the battles between state government and federal government. If we're going to fix the political problems in America and in the world, then the governments will have to be decentralized and more power and responsibility will have to go to the states. And that's happening. Eventually there will be decentralized government. We'll see the reestablishment of what existed in Europe 500 years ago with what we called city-states. That Florence was its own city-state. Venice was its own city-state. So you had these throughout Europe. And because of the energy of the fourth ray was so high, of course the arts and crafts and guild systems were and they still are. I've been to Florence fairly recently, and they still have the craftsmen. You can walk down the alleys in Florence, Italy, and there's guys in there carving huge, long pillar-like pieces of stone, and it's incredible to see it. It's still there. The numinostic energy of 500 years ago still has some resonance in some of the major cities in Europe. One of the things that about the fourth ray that Alice Bailey told us was that an indication that the fourth ray was coming in would be that blue flowers would begin to disappear all across the planet. This is an article that was in Scientific American magazine about 10 years ago, nine years ago, I think it was. And inexplicably, the flowers are disappearing. And as I said earlier, Bailey said that this would be an indication that the fourth ray energy was beginning to come in. Interestingly, after I had given this talk there at the college, there were two women that were in the front row who came up to me. And the first lady said to me, "Well, Dave, you've answered my question." I said, "What was that?" She said, "Well, I've planted blue delphiniums every year for 19 years. And she said a year before they were spindly, and then last year they were just really almost not any growth at all, and this year there was none." And she said they're completely have died out. The other lady who came up with this woman said, "We go horseback riding in Colorado in the meadows up in the mountains, and I noticed this year and last year there were no blue flowers." I said, "Write that down on a piece of paper and give it to me so I can use that for future reference." And they did. And I have it at home. So we're beginning to see, just through this clue that Bailey gave us about the disappearance of the blue flowers. The rays express themselves multifariously through all of nature. We see the qualities. The first ray is will and power. The second ray is love, wisdom. It's love and wisdom are synonymous terms. We use them interchangeably oftentimes in the esoteric. The third ray is active intelligence. The fourth ray, which we're talking about now, is art and harmony through conflict. And another way to look at it is, if 75 years ago when World War II ended, just this week, and the documents were signed, if you would have told somebody that 75 years into the future that our greatest allies would be the Germans and the Japanese, they would have never believed it. But that's the way the fourth ray works. It brings harmony through immense conflict. The fifth ray is the ray of concrete knowledge and science, an analytical mind. The sixth ray is devotion and idealism. We said that was dying out. Jesus was a sixth ray master, supposedly. The seventh ray is the ray of ceremonial order and ritual. Another expression of the seventh ray bringing order was after World War II in America, and Eisenhower was elected the president. He began to build the interstate highway system, copied off of the Autobahn established by Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. But this interstate system is very seventh ray, and it gives order to traffic throughout America, whether you're going on vacation or you're a truck driver trying to get somewhere in Montana. It gives great order and makes travel so much easier. The colors that express themselves through the rays are scarlet and white. Blavatsky used to wear a white silk blouse and maybe a red skirt of some kind, and she'd have a big plumed hat cocked on her head. And these are colors. My sister-in-law was a very first-ray person, and she would wear red and white a lot. It's extraordinary. I remember remarking to my sister, who doesn't know anything about the esoteric, about trying to explain this to her. Indigo blue, the color of the sky at night is indigo. And we live in a second-ray solar system. We say God is love. And that's the second ray. God is love. Active intelligence, the green, something green, usually some mystics will talk about visualizing a green cube in the region of the brow chakra. Yellow is art and harmony through conflict, the fourth ray. of yellow. Orange, the fifth ray of concrete and scientific knowledge. Orange in ancient Atlantis, orange and turquoise and white were prevalent colors in much of the artwork and decor in the buildings at that time. Blue rose, devotion and idealism, again of the dying sixth ray. And of course, violet is the color of ceremonial order and magic. A lot of times I will wear an amethyst ring, which of course is violet, and it brings in added seventh ray energy. I have a seventh ray personality, and sometimes I need extra seventh ray energy, and so I will wear that ring, which also has my horoscope engraved on it. And that adds to the energies that I receive when I talk. I've known other people who had similar jewelry. Zodiacal signs, Capricorn, Leo, and Aries, under the auspices of the first ray. And so you can go right down the list here and see how these are working themselves out. Planetary rulers fall under rays, and it makes for a very powerful astrology, which is soul-based, with the emphasis on the ascendant. And we'll see that later in the slide presentation, where we're looking at the horoscope of America, which will help us understand some of the things that are going on in the world right now, especially in America. Foods, proteins, first ray, fats, second ray, carbohydrates, third ray. We don't know yet what the fourth ray is. Vitamins, under the fifth ray influence, water, sixth ray, and mineral salts under the seventh ray. We use mineral salts based on astrological indicators in the horoscope to keep the body alkaline, and a cancer cannot grow in an alkaline body. So people who are interested in esoteric healing are aware of this, and there are very good explanations in some of Douglas Baker's astrology books, which I recommend. Musical notes, do, the first ray, so, second ray, fa, third ray, mi, fourth ray, re, fifth ray, ti, sixth ray, and la, the seventh ray. So we have all of the musical notes, and each one has a ray correspondent. Politics, fascism, first ray, second ray, democracy. We are a republic based on some democratic ideals. Socialism is third ray. City-state, which will come in under the fourth ray. You'll see this. It's already kind of starting to happen. You can see the states here in America where they're fighting for more power over themselves and less jurisdiction or control from Washington. It's a chaotic time. It's not perfect. It may take another 10 or 20 or who knows how many years for it to really solidify. So we say that fifth ray is an oligarchy. Sixth ray is a theocratic despotism. And seventh ray is communism. The whole idea of those communal farms they had and bringing order to the people. Of course, it didn't work out well. It was an experiment by the hierarchy that failed. Gases, nitrogen, first ray, oxygen, second ray, hydrogen, third ray, carbon dioxide falls under the fourth ray, ammonia, fifth ray, incense under the sixth ray. And of course, the Catholic Church is famous for its incense. I have some Catholic incense at my home I've had for many years, made in a Catholic monastery in Iowa. And it's wonderful, wonderful stuff. So nitrous oxide, interestingly, is a seventh ray gas. And then, of course, there's sight, first ray, intuition, hearing, taste, concrete, touch, pain, 6th ray. Smell, 7th ray, the last of the senses to develop, it's said, in Atlantis was the sense of smell, which was the 7th ray factor. The planes, here the planes, most of you will probably know the planes, the atmic plane, the logoic plane, our logos, again, 2nd ray, mental, 3rd ray, Buddhic, 4th ray, monastic, 5th ray, mental, 6th ray, astral, devotional, and idealism, and the physico-etheric in the 7th. So we can go through this whole list, but I thought it would be interesting just to talk briefly here about the nation's soul. India and China have a 1st ray soul. UK and USA share a common soul, the 2nd ray soul. America was never meant to be split apart from England. It happened for a number of reasons, which I'll give in a future lecture. We don't really know the nations that have 3rd ray souls. It's not given out yet. Germany and Austria, certainly 4th ray when you think of World War I, World War II, and all of the other wars in Europe. France, very 5th ray. Italy and Spain, 6th ray with the Catholic Church, and its home there in the Vatican in Rome. And Russia, again, 7th ray. Personalities, UK, Germany, 1st ray, no doubt about Germany. Brazil, 2nd ray. China and France, 3rd ray. India and Italy, 4th ray. Austria, 5th ray. America and Russia, a 6th ray personality and a 2nd ray soul. It makes America one of the concerns of the spiritual hierarchy at this time, is that America is prone to socialism, and they don't want to see it. They want a president with a 1st ray soul and a 1st ray personality, which is interestingly what Blavatsky had. She had a 1st ray soul and a 1st ray personality. Spain, of course, very 7th ray, mysterious place, Spain. And so the shapes, too, as you can see here, fall into these categories of the ray shapes. Interestingly, the pyramid is seen as a 7th ray manifestation. The chakras, the head, 1st ray, heart, 2nd ray, love, wisdom, throat, 3rd ray, base of the spine, 4th ray, brow, 5th ray, solar plexus, 6th ray, the sacral center, the 7th ray, and the kingdoms in nature. Shambhala, 1st ray, hierarchy, 2nd ray, Davic kingdom, 3rd ray, humanity, 4th ray, animal kingdom, 5th, plant, 6th, and the mineral kingdom, the 7th. We say that, again, the soul ray of humanity is a 4th ray soul, so there's always this conflict on the planet Earth. The history of the Earth is the history largely of war, and its personality is 5th ray. We are thinkers. Initiate beings who I have known in my life and who were in contact in fairly recent times said that they had asked Blavatsky for a symbol of the Piscean age. And on the inner planes, Blavatsky went like this and wrung her hands. Like the two fishes, the hands are fish-like, the feet are fish-like in esoteric anatomy and in esoteric astrology. And that the wringing of the hands was a perfect symbol for the Piscean age, which has been an age of turmoil and turbulence and war and famine and strife. And it really does explain it. The special virtues of the 4th ray of humanity are strong affections, sympathy, physical courage, generosity, devotion, and quickness of intellect and perception. The weaknesses are self-centeredness, worrying, we all do a lot of that, inaccuracy, lack of moral courage, strong passions, indolence, and extravagance. And the virtues that are to be acquired of the 4th ray are serenity, confidence, self-control, purity, unselfishness, accuracy, and mental and moral balance. Interestingly, we need to understand something about the horoscope of America that explains what we're doing right now. In esoteric astrology, the great emphasis is on the rising sign. It points the direction to the soul. There's a lot of confusion among esoteric astrologers, and somebody has put forth the idea of some triple sun something or other that they dug up in the files at Lucis Trust. Probably more of an esoteric blind, that the real triple aspect is the rising sign, its esoteric ruler, and where that esoteric ruler is found in the horoscope. There are incidences where it's not these three aspects or these three vectors, but sometimes it's just one. I know my wife was a Leo ascendant and had Leo in her first house, and everything was pretty much there. And she was a very vivacious woman, and all the other attributes that go with being a Leo. We see a stellium of planets in Cancer, and what Gemini does is it does two things. It splits and divides. The country is split and divided. It has been. It was created out of a split and a division from England. The Civil War split and divided the nation between the North and the South, and the people who wanted slavery and those who didn't. There is always the issue, and especially around election time, of black prejudice, and so that's raising its head at the current time. And again, the nation is split and divided, which is a characteristic of Gemini. I'll give a more detailed explanation in this when I give the lecture at my home, which will also be filmed or recorded. One of the things that very few people, even the most esoteric people that you'll ever meet, they never talk about this, and it's bewildered me for years. The occult or esoteric, Blavatsky said occult because it was the 19th century, and those were the terms that they used. Now we may or may not use the word esoteric to supplement occult. For some reason, the word occult, which means esoteric, scares people. But that these esoteric or occult teachings would come out in three waves over periods of 50-year increments. From 1875, Blavatsky and the founding of the Theosophical Society, and for 50 years after, was known as the preparatory phase. Around this time, Steiner came in and he established, earlier on than maybe around the time of the First World War, the Anthroposophical Society. He was a kind of a guy who made a transition from this preparatory phase in the beginning of what we call the intermediate phase, which was primarily the work of Alice Bailey under the direction of D.K. Now, there's great hostility among many unenlightened esotericists about D.K. And if you're thinking of the esoteric in the terms of a fundamentalist, then you can understand why they don't want D.K. to have any prominence. But he certainly did, and he was appointed to be Blavatsky's teacher after Kutumi and Moria had withdrawn. He also opened up the second or intermediate phase through Alice Bailey. I knew elderly people when I was a young guy that were friends of Alice Bailey's and used to tell me stories about her. I knew many of the original Arcane School members, Rose Comito, who was an incredible healer and healed me, and probably 100 people. in a room of 400 or 500 people back in 1980. A lovely woman. So this was the intermediate phase from 1925 to 1975, another 50-year period. My whole soul's purpose and why I was born was for this phase right here, for the revelatory phase. And that's the phase that we've been in since 1975, and it will continue until 2025, at which time the prophecies say that the masters will externalize in the world. I believe that some of them may already be here. I'm not going to argue the point, but I'll give more details on that at a later date. So we're in this revelatory phase, and as I say, as a young guy, I knew that I didn't want to rehash the old teachings. I wanted to be able to give out some new teachings into the world, and it's part of my soul's purpose. So here is Blavatsky, who was born on August 12, 1831, and died, of course, May 8, 1891. And she brought in this preparatory phase along with this group of initiate teachers of various and varying degrees. She is the founder of the Theosophical Society and the great doyen of the esoteric teachings in modern times. There's Moria, DK, and Kutumi. This picture of DK was painted by Annie Gowland, who was an old-time theosophist who had lived in Tibet and traveled to the Lamasery where DK taught. And they had told her, Annie Gowland, who had been living there for a time, that they were going to bring a teacher in who was so powerful that you couldn't look at him, because if you looked at him, he would scatter all of your atoms. So they carried a DK in and set him on his was really kind of a throne. And she stood up and looked at him, and she said when she did, he was looking right exactly at her. And the image of him was burned into her brain, and she painted 5 tempera paintings of DK. He's not in that physical body anymore. He vacated that body in 1963, and he's in the body of a Middle Eastern man, 15 years of age. And but anyway, he influenced the work of Bailey, and near the end of Blavatsky's life, he worked with Blavatsky and through her. He took the 5th initiation around the time of Blavatsky, and not too different from the time that she actually took the 5th initiation. There's Alice Bailey, and these are the 24 books that she wrote. I highly recommend those. And this is what we call the intermediate phase. It's the middle phase between the preliminary and the revelatory period. And she was an amazing woman. Didn't have a real good education, but she was able to telepathically link up with DK. Like I said, I knew a number of people who knew her. I can remember an English mystic. He actually lived in South Africa. His name was Dr. Joseph Busby. And I had lived in Africa for a time with Busby and his wife Louise, who was also a disciple of DK, and he had appeared to her at numerous times. He would materialize before her, as he did with Alice Bailey. But Alice Bailey was a very unique woman. She was friends with Annie Gowland, of course, and my friends, the Busbys, who were, to me, changed my whole life. Most spiritual people I think I've ever known. But she wrote these lovely books on a vast array of subjects, and we highly recommend them. They are classic writings, telepathically communicated to her I remember Busby telling me one time he went to an apartment in New York City where she lived, and the door was ajar, and he had a book that was given to him to give to her. And he could see her through the crack of the door, and she was sitting in front of a window, and she was just like staring out into space, and then she would write stuff down. And so he knocked on the door. She came to the door to greet him, and they began a friendship at that time. Interesting woman. One of the things that she said that I see happening in the world is I see the beginning, could be the end, of World War III, which Bailey said would be fought in the clouds. And what she meant by that was she meant people misinterpreted it and thought that she was talking about rockets and bombs and airplanes. But what she was really talking about was she was talking about the principles of black magic psychology and using television, radio, and the internet, which was non-existent, and television was almost non-existent when she gave this information out, that the war would be fought in the world of ideas, and truths and lies would abound, and it would be one of the last great battles of the black magicians on the planet before the New Age and the Aquarian Age could enter on Earth. Group ills and the sweep of epidemics of any kind through the masses are found in some conditions in the etheric substance of the planet. Those diseases which are general, national, racial, and planetary find their way to an individual via his etheric body, but are not so personal in their implications. She also said something very interesting that I feel compelled to give out at this time. She said that cancer was a disease of Atlantean origin, and basically implied that it would just run its course and it wouldn't exist again. It's pretty incredible to think about. Rudolf Steiner, one of my favorite guys, built the Goetheanum, and the Goetheanum holds an important position among esoteric students by virtue of the fact, even Steiner people, I don't know of any Steiner people who know this. He built the Goetheanum to fulfill the prophecies of the reappearance of the Christ or a world teacher. And when he built the Goetheanum, which was the greatest school in the esoteric world, he built it without hammers and nails. They're interlocking pieces of wood, and only a genius like Steiner could figure something like that out. And the prophecy said that when the greatest temple, school dedicated to the wisdom teachings was consumed by fire, that the Christ or a world teacher would be born. That was the prophecy. They always said the Nazis burn it down, but the Nazis didn't burn it down. The reason behind the building of the school without hammers and nails was to attract fire devas to the school. They would attract fire devas. And the school was thus consumed. And of course the Nazis were blamed. It was the night of December 31st, around midnight, 1922. But Steiner is never really, I don't think, given the respect that he really deserves. But I've always been enthralled with the Goetheanum, the school. And then eventually it was built out of concrete, very Art Deco design. But the original school was built of wood and without hammers and nails. Steiner says that the only other method that is as good is to live in the center of an epidemic or epidemic illness and to think of nothing but the sickness all around. filled only with a fear of getting sick. That would be equally effective if fear of the illness is the only thing created in such a place, and one goes to sleep at night with that thought in it, produces after images, imaginations impregnated with fear. That is a good method of cultivating and nurturing germs, telling you that if you're fearing it, you're feeding it energy. You're living in fear of something like COVID-19 or the Chinese virus or whatever you want to call it. You're feeding it energy. And what you need to do is you need to not feed it and not live in fear, but to raise your own atomic vibrations, and you'll build an extraordinary immunity to it. Those are very esoteric comments. So we see that on this graph here, this image, the Asian flu back in 1957, 1 million deaths, a little over worldwide. 68, the Hong Kong flu, I remember that. 97, the bird flu, many of us remember that. SARS, in 2003, there was even the swine flu back in the 70s. We don't have that listed on there, but there are always these epidemics that originate in China. They say the reason that they do is that the Chinese people raise the chickens and whatever birds they're raising above the swine, live below, and then the swine eat the deposits of the bird, and then it goes through their system and is released out into the world, and then the wind blows the dried debris through the jet stream across the earth, and these viruses begin to affect us in the form of flus. It's a lot to think about. A virus is a member of the crystal family. In fact, the last lecture I gave at my home on the origin, two medical hypotheses on the origin of AIDS. It was live streamed. A lot of people saw it. And the first hypothesis was the virus was created by accident through the World Health Organization's mass inoculation for the eradication of smallpox in Central Africa. At that time, there were many Haitian soldiers that were there. The interesting thing that came out of it is that the two epicenters were in Central Africa and Haiti. And of course, the Haitian soldiers were receiving the smallpox vaccinations the same as the natives were. And what happened was the smallpox was given, the virus was given to cattle to produce the antibodies. And the problem was that many of the cattle were suffering from bovine leukemia virus. And it created what's called a recombinant virus, where the two viruses merged, and it became what we call HIV or AIDS, and it spread throughout the world. It was a horrible accident, many of us believe. The other hypothesis is that the virus had always existed in the soil in that region of the world, which is really a Lemurian landmass, and that the tilling of the soil, funded by the World Bank to make people peanut farmers and cashew nut farmers in Central Africa, as they were trying to build their economies, became airborne. And people breathed the viruses in, which are really crystalline. They're members of the crystal family, and they morph and change. And that in this way people were affected. The Haitian soldiers were there because they spoke French, and they were there to help out in the French-speaking countries of Central Africa. So it's something to think about. It's very stimulating mentally, at least for me. This is a picture of the COVID-19, and it is said by experts that these little red protuberances on the surfaces are actually man-made. I can't prove it, I can't disprove it, but I wouldn't be surprised by it. Again, just food for thought. People, of course, are irate about being restricted in their movement. We live here in Michigan. We're in Detroit tonight. Virus lockdown protesters. You'll see more of that. And something has to be done. The vaccine, if that's the answer, I don't want it myself, but some people do. And that should hopefully eliminate the problem, but I don't know. I have doubts. This is food for thought, and a friend of mine in England sent this to me just 2 days ago. And it gives a list of the fearful things that have evolved over the last 20 years. And it began in 2000 with Y2K. Everybody remembers Y2K, or at least most of us do. Anthrax in 2001, everybody thought anthrax was going to kill us. The Nile virus, SARS, bird flu. So the list is pretty extensive, and we need to think along those terms. What about time-wise, Randy? I'm right at 40 minutes right now.
You can go on as long as you want, and then
I'm almost done.
We can cut out.
Yeah, we'll cut out. Yeah.
So carry on.
Okay. So one of the things I might say about this fear of all of these things that never really materialized, it's just people feeding off of it. Steiner said something very interesting in his lectures and his writings. He said that 100 years ago, Steiner said that the mass mental illness of America in the 21st century would be hysteria. And I see a lot of hysteria in the world in the 21st century. And that's something that has to stop. It's no good for anybody, except the dark forces, whoever they are. I had one of the things that will come out of the revelatory period, this third outpouring period, will be people with conscious mediumship. Blavatsky was a conscious medium. I have had many, many experiences in my life in conscious mediumship. And one of them was 19 years ago. Almost today, in fact, 19 years ago. Where I was meditating in my den, and when I opened my eyes, I saw two twin towers, scale models about 5 feet tall, and they began to collapse just like in this picture. And of course, I was told, it's amazing, it isn't even that I saw these in my den where I meditate. I saw it 10 days before it happened. I was told 2 weeks earlier in a summer school program attended by esoteric students from all over the world up in the mountains outside of Naples. I could look from the hallway window, my upstairs bedroom, and see the Bay of Naples and the city of Naples. It was a beautiful sight. And I can remember the teacher there telling me that there were people in the audience who would begin to have experiences in conscious mediumship. Interestingly, one of my theosophical friends in England, David Harvey, which some people might know that name, was the treasurer of the Blavatsky Lodge for a number of years, a very good friend of mine. I told him a year after it happened about this vision that I had had, and he was there when we were told about we would begin having experiences in conscious mediumship. And David Harvey said, yeah, he said, I had a similar experience. He said, I was in the plane, and the plane was flying in toward the building, toward one of the towers. I thought that was interesting. It was like he'd gotten a portion of it, and so did I. We each saw it from two different perspectives. This is the way the fourth ray works. It goes from crisis to being resolved we reach a plateau of harmony, and then we create a new crisis, and then another plateau, and then a greater and greater crisis, and then greater unfoldment and resolution to the problem. We all know people who we say, everything's perfect in their life, and then they screw it up, they mess it up, because a lot of them have either a fourth ray mind or a fourth ray soul. And that's the way the fourth ray works. That's the way humanity works. The impacts of social distancing and long-distance learning on our young generation, changes in the educational system and the workplace, and it's causing changes in parenting and socializing. And a lot of people don't like it. I don't know how long it's going to last. It could morph into something else. I think one of the things that it will eventually morph into is that you'll see more online universities, more online schooling will be a part of it. And it could be a permanent fixture. But we're in this birthing period, and so it's a time of transition. These are things here, images from a lecture I gave at a college here in Michigan on the coming world renaissance. Here's a picture here in Venice, which will be one of the cities in Europe. There'll be new forms of architecture. There'll be new types of music. There'll be new materials to build things out of, metals with memory. Some of them already exist. New art forms. It'll be a tremendous time for the arts and the humanities to flourish. Here's the CERN collider. Here's some new architecture that'll be built around the world. Anybody who can remember the artwork of Sid Mead, where he would do these futuristic cities that were built on towers, that could become a reality maybe 5,000 years from now by virtue of the fact that the cities will be built up above the earth so that they're receiving more etheric energy, more prana from the sun, the sunlight. And some people say they'll build them on mountains and extend them up, and they'll be healthier environments. I don't know, but it's food for thought, and it is interesting. The colonization of the moon has always been a fascination for me. Our own teachings in theosophy tell us that the moon is much, much older than the earth, and that the moon was so close to the earth 1 billion years ago, 2 billion years ago, that it protected it from cosmic bombardment in the same way as a mother would protect her child. And now the roles are reversed, and now the moon is the child and the earth is the mother. And what is happening is the surface of the moon, as it was blown away, it also destroyed the astral body of the moon. These are occult teachings. They're in the books. So the increased population of the planet Earth, now over 7 billion people, produces an emotional effluent, whether it's through sporting events, any screaming or yelling, whatever we do, we're producing an emotional effluent. It's going out into space. And the astral body of the Earth is expanding, and it now reaches the moon, and it's affecting the gravitational pull of the moon, which is having an effect on Earth with increased tsunamic activity, earthquakes, and volcanoes. And we'll see more of it until it completely encapsulates the moon, and then things will subside, kind of like a fourth ray experience. But the interesting thing about colonization of the moon is that there is water on the moon. And the fact that people will colonize it means that the DNA, which may be our most sacred thing that we have, and our solar system is our DNA, and that it will be spread out, possibly to Mars after the moon. Who knows where it will end? It's hard to visualize what the world will be like 1,000 years from now, or even 30 years from now. So I don't discount these things in my repertoire of understanding. This is my email address, and I'm on Facebook. If you'd like to contact me about any of this material, feel free to do so. I'm not afraid of being attacked. I have broad shoulders and can withstand the derision. So I want to thank everybody for their attendance tonight, for tuning in to this talk, and we'll have more of them in the future. Thank you.